The morning mist clung to the castle walls like forgotten dreams, and Lady Alara Whitmore stood at her chamber window, watching the sun pierce through the gray veil that had settled over the kingdom of Valdris. Her fingers traced the cold stone sill as she contemplated the weight of her destiny. In 3 days, she would wed King Aldrich of the neighboring realm, a union that would seal a peace treaty and secure her family's honor. Yet something deep within her soul whispered of another path, one that felt as distant as the stars, yet as close as her own heartbeat. The tapestries in her room depicted scenes of ancient love stories, but none seemed to match the emptiness she felt when she imagined herself crowned as queen. Her lady-in-waiting, Margaret, had often told her she was blessed to have such a future awaiting her, but Ilara wondered if a blessing could feel so much like a cage. A strange shimmer in the air caught her attention, like heat waves rising from summer stone, but the morning was cold. The shimmer grew stronger, bending light in impossible ways, until the very fabric of reality seemed to tear open before her eyes. From this ethereal wound stepped a man unlike any she had ever seen. His clothes were foreign, made of materials she couldn't identify, and his eyes held knowledge that seemed to span centuries. "Forgive me," he said, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't place. "But I've come to warn you. Your destiny is not what it seems." Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she found her voice. "Who are you? How did you? What manner of sorcery is this?" The stranger closed the strange tear in the air with a gesture, and the shimmer faded. "My name is Marcus Chen, and I come from a time far beyond yours. I know this is difficult to believe, but I'm here because your marriage to King Aldrich will set in motion events that lead to centuries of war and suffering." She stepped back, her mind reeling. "That's impossible. You speak madness." Marcus reached into his coat and withdrew a device that glowed with soft blue light. Images flickered across its surface, scenes of battlefields, burning cities, and endless graveyards. This is your world, 300 years from now. Your marriage to Aldrich creates an heir whose bloodline becomes obsessed with conquest. The peace you think you're securing lasts only a generation before it crumbles into something far worse. Ilara stared at the impossible visions, her rational mind warring with what she was seeing. "Even if what you show me is true, I cannot simply abandon my duty, my family, my kingdom." "There is another way," Marcus interrupted, his eyes intense, "but it requires you to trust me, to leave behind everything you've known." Over the following hours, Marcus revealed more of his impossible truth. He showed her glimpses of technology beyond her imagination, spoke of flying machines and healing methods that seemed like miracles. But more than his strange knowledge, it was the way he looked at her, not as a political pawn or a means to an end, but as a woman whose thoughts and dreams mattered, that began to crack the walls around her heart. "In my time," he told her, as they walked through the castle gardens under cover of darkness, "we study history like others study nature. I've read about you, Lady Ilara. The chronicles call you wise beyond your years, but they also say you died young, heartbroken, and alone, despite all your royal privileges." "And you've come to save me from this fate?" she asked, though something in his expression suggested the truth was more complicated. Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. "I came to prevent a war, but now I find myself caring more about saving you than saving history." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither dared cross. Ilara felt something stirring within her that she had never experienced, a pull toward this mysterious man that was stronger than duty, stronger than fear. But the rational part of her mind kept insisting this was madness. "Show me more," she whispered. "Show me what happens if I don't marry the king." Marcus hesitated. "The future isn't written in stone. If you choose differently, new possibilities emerge, but I can't predict what they'll be. That's the terrifying beauty of free will. It creates infinite paths." That night, Alara lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind churning with impossible possibilities. Everything she had been taught about duty and destiny warred with this new understanding that her choices mattered more than her bloodline. When sleep finally came, she dreamed of flying through clouds on metal wings, of cities that touched the sky, and of Marcus's hand in hers as they walked through worlds she couldn't imagine. The next morning brought an urgency she hadn't expected. King Aldrich arrived a day early with his retinue, eager to meet his bride and finalize the arrangements. Alara found herself studying his face across the great hall during the welcoming feast, trying to see the future tyrant Marcus had warned her about. But Aldrich seemed kind enough, a man in his 40s with graying temples and eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Was she seeing only what she wanted to see, or was Marcus's future truly inevitable? "You seem troubled, my lady," Aldrich said after the meal. "I hope my early arrival hasn't distressed you." "Not at all, Your Majesty," she replied, forcing a smile. "I was merely contemplating the magnitude of the change ahead." He nodded understandingly. "Marriage is always a leap of faith, particularly for those of our station. But I believe we can build something good together, a legacy of peace that will outlast us both." His words might have comforted her once, but now they felt like chains. As he spoke of their future children and the prosperity their union would bring, all she could think of was Marcus's visions of war and devastation. Was this kind man truly capable of siring the monster Marcus had described? Or was there still time to change his path as well? That night, Marcus appeared in her chambers again, materializing from that strange shimmer in the air. "We're running out of time," he said urgently. "I can take you away from here tonight. We can disappear into the time stream, find a place where you can live freely." "And leave my people to whatever fate awaits them?" Alara asked. "You said my marriage brings war. But what of my absence? Won't that create its own catastrophe?" Marcus's expression grew troubled. I don't know. I've become too close to this situation to see clearly. In my time, we have strict protocols about temporal interference, but I've already broken most of them just by being here, by caring about you." She moved closer to him, drawn by the vulnerability in his voice. "What happens to you when this is over? Do you return to your time and pretend none of this happened?" "That was the plan," he admitted. "But I've been thinking, maybe I could stay. Maybe we could find a way to be together without destroying the future." The possibility hung between them like a fragile soap bubble, beautiful but likely to burst at the slightest touch. Ilara reached out and took his hand, marveling at how real he felt, despite being from a world she could barely comprehend. "There's something you're not telling me," she said, reading the conflict in his eyes. "What is it?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then sighed heavily. "In my timeline, you don't just die young. You die tomorrow night, poisoned by someone in Aldrich's retinue who wants to restart the old wars. Your death becomes the catalyst for everything that follows." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Tomorrow night? But that's the wedding night. Yes, I came here not just to prevent your marriage, but to save your life. But now I realize that saving you might not be enough. The seeds of future conflict run deeper than any single event. Elara sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the weight of this knowledge. Her death, her marriage, her choices, all of it seemed predetermined by forces beyond her control. So whatever I choose, someone suffers. If I marry Aldrich, I die, and future generations pay the price. If I don't, I may live, but my people face immediate consequences. Unless, Marcus said slowly, we find a third option. She looked up at him. What do you mean? What if we don't just prevent your marriage or your death? What if we expose the real threat? If someone in Aldrich's party plans to poison you, they're the true enemy of peace. Revealing them might change everything. It was a dangerous gamble, but it offered something the other choices didn't. They spent the remaining hours until dawn planning their strategy. Marcus would use his knowledge of future events to identify the would-be assassin, while Elara would find a way to expose them publicly in a manner that couldn't be dismissed or covered up. The wedding day dawned gray and cold, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon like omens. As Elara prepared for the ceremony, her hands shaking as Margaret helped her into the elaborate gown, she thought about all the lives hanging in the balance of the next few hours. The dress felt like armor, beautiful but heavy with the weight of destiny. Marcus had identified the threat, Sir Roderick, one of Aldrich's most trusted advisors, who apparently served a faction that profited from conflict between the kingdoms. He would strike during the wedding feast, using a rare poison that would make her death appear natural, occurring just late enough to make it seem like Aldrich's fault. The ceremony passed in a blur of ritual and pageantry. Elara spoke her vows mechanically, her mind focused on the plan she and Marcus had devised. She noticed Sir Roderick watching her closely, his eyes cold despite his ceremonial smile. When their gazes met, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. During the feast, as musicians played and nobles celebrated, Elara watched Roderick carefully. Marcus, disguised as a servant, using technology she didn't pretend to understand, moved through the crowd, carrying a device that could detect the specific poison before it was administered. The plan was to catch Roderick in the act, but as the evening wore on, doubt crept into her mind. What if they were wrong? What if Marcus's knowledge was incomplete? Then she saw it. Roderick discreetly adding something to her wine cup while she was distracted by a toast. Marcus caught her eye from across the room and nodded grimly. It was time. "My lords and ladies," Elara called out, rising from her seat before she could lose her nerve. "Before we continue this celebration, I must share something that weighs heavily on my heart." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to her. King Aldrich looked puzzled but attentive, while Roderick's face remained carefully neutral. "Marriage should be built on trust and honesty," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "Yet there are those among us who would use this sacred occasion to sow discord and violence." She picked up her wine cup and held it high. "This cup, which should contain wine to toast our union, has instead been tainted with poison by one who claims to serve peace but profits from war." Gasps echoed throughout the hall. Roderick shot to his feet, his face flushed with indignation. "This is outrageous! How dare you make such an accusation?" Then, you won't mind if we test the wine. Marcus stepped forward, no longer disguised, his strange device humming with energy. The room erupted in shocked murmurs at his sudden appearance, but Ilara continued before anyone could react. This man comes from far away, bringing knowledge that can reveal truth from deception. It wasn't entirely a lie, she reasoned. Let him examine the cup, and we'll see who speaks truly. Marcus activated his device, which projected a holographic display showing the molecular structure of the wine. Even medieval eyes could see the foreign substance that had been added. Aconite, he announced, a poison derived from wolfsbane, designed to mimic heart failure, untraceable by your current methods, but fatal within hours. The evidence was undeniable, but Roderick wasn't finished. With a snarl of rage, he drew his sword. "Sorcery! You traffic with demons and witches!" He lunged toward Ilara, but Marcus intercepted him, the two men grappling for control of the blade. The fight was brief but vicious. Roderick was skilled with a sword, but Marcus had advantages the medieval knight couldn't anticipate: knowledge of anatomy, reflexes honed by future training methods, and most importantly, the desperate strength of a man protecting someone he loved. When it was over, Roderick lay dead on the floor, his own blade through his heart. "Seize the sorcerer!" someone shouted, but King Aldrich raised his hand for silence. "Wait," he commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. He studied Marcus with intelligent eyes, then turned to Ilara. "My lady wife, I would hear your explanation for these extraordinary events." Ilara took a deep breath, knowing that everything depended on her next words. "Your Majesty, this man saved not only my life, but potentially the lives of countless others. Sir Roderick was not acting alone. He represents forces that would see our kingdoms return to endless war. As for the unusual methods used to reveal this truth, perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain unexplained." Aldrich nodded slowly. "You speak wisdom. The evidence of treachery is clear, regardless of how it was obtained." He looked at Marcus. "You have my gratitude, stranger, though I confess I do not understand who or what you are." "I am someone who believes in the possibility of peace," Marcus replied carefully. "Someone who has seen what happens when good people fail to prevent evil from taking root." The king studied him for a long moment, then made a decision that surprised everyone. "Then perhaps you should remain here to help ensure that such evil finds no purchase in our lands. I offer you a place in my court, if you will have it." Marcus looked at Ilara, and she saw her own hope reflected in his eyes. "I accept, Your Majesty, with one condition. I serve not just your court, but the cause of lasting peace between all nations." The days that followed brought revelations that confirmed Marcus's warnings. Roderick's belongings contained correspondence with war profiteers and displaced nobles who benefited from conflict. The assassination plot had been part of a larger scheme to destabilize the region, using Ilara's death as a spark to ignite old hatreds. But something unexpected happened as well. With the immediate threat neutralized and the truth exposed, King Aldrich began to change. Perhaps it was the shock of how close he had come to being manipulated, or perhaps it was seeing his new queen's courage in the face of mortal danger, but he seemed to shed some invisible burden. He became more thoughtful, more careful about the counsel he received, more interested in building genuine relationships with his people rather than simply ruling them. You may have prevented more than you know, Elara told Marcus one evening as they walked through the castle gardens. She was still adjusting to married life, but surprisingly, it was not the prison she had feared. Aldrich had proven to be a considerate husband, more interested in partnership than dominance. The future is definitely changing, Marcus agreed, checking a device that showed him temporal fluctuations. The question is whether it's changing for the better. Do you regret staying? She asked. You gave up your entire world to remain here. Marcus stopped walking and took her hands in his. I gave up a world where you were just a name in a history book. I chose a world where you're real, where you can make choices that matter. How could I regret that? The complexity of their situation weighed on both of them. Ilara was married to a good man who deserved her loyalty, but her heart belonged to someone who had crossed centuries to save her. Marcus had found love, but at the cost of everything familiar, trapped in a time not his own, with no way back to the life he had known. We cannot be together as we might wish, Ilara said softly, but perhaps there are different kinds of love, different ways of honoring what we feel. Marcus nodded, understanding. In my time, we have a concept called agape, love that transcends personal desire, love that seeks the good of the beloved above all else. Maybe that's what we're meant to share. It was not the ending either of them would have written, but it was honest and true to who they were. Ilara threw herself into learning statecraft from Aldrich, becoming not just a queen in name, but a true partner in governance. She established councils that included common folk as well as nobles, created systems for peaceful resolution of disputes, and worked tirelessly to build bridges between the kingdoms. Marcus became her unofficial advisor, his knowledge of future consequences invaluable in shaping policies that would stand the test of time. To the court, he was an eccentric scholar with unusual insights. To Ilara, he was a reminder that the future was always in motion, always capable of being changed by courage and wisdom. Years passed, and the changes they had set in motion rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. The heir that Aldrich and Ilara eventually produced was raised with a deep understanding of responsibility and compassion, shaped by both parents and by Marcus's subtle influence. The child grew up hearing stories of how a single choice could alter the fate of nations, how the courage to do right mattered more than blood or birthright. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, as Ilara stood once again at her chamber window watching the morning mist, she reflected on the strange paths that had brought her to this moment. She had never become the tyrant's mother that Marcus had warned against, but neither had she lived the fairy tale life that childhood dreams had promised. Instead, she had found something rarer, a life of purpose, where her choices mattered and her actions could help shape a better world. Marcus appeared beside her, as he still did sometimes when the weight of governance grew heavy and she needed his counsel. He looked older now, touched by time and the responsibilities he had taken on, but his eyes still held that same intensity that had first captured her attention. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what would have happened if you had never come, if you had let history take its original course?" "Every day," he admitted, "but then I see what we've built together. Not just you and I, but all of us. The peace holds, the kingdoms prosper, and your son shows every sign of becoming a wise and just ruler. Perhaps some destinies are worth changing." She smiled, watching their reflection in the window glass, a queen and a time traveler, bound together by a love that transcended the conventional boundaries of romance or friendship. They had saved each other in ways that went beyond the simple prevention of death or war. They had saved each other's capacity to hope, to choose, to believe that the future could be better than the past. As the morning sun burned away the mist, revealing the bustling kingdom below, Elara felt a deep sense of contentment. She had been destined to marry a king, and she had. But more importantly, she had chosen to become a queen worthy of the crown she wore, to build a legacy that would honor both the man who loved her from across time and the husband who trusted her with his kingdom. The future, she knew, was still unwritten, and that was exactly as it should be. In the end, the greatest magic was not Marcus's ability to travel through time, but their shared capacity to believe that love, in all its forms, could change the world. They had altered more than just the course of history. They had proven that destiny was not a chain that bound people to predetermined fates, but a compass that could guide them toward possibilities they had never dared to imagine. The time traveler had indeed changed her fate forever, but perhaps more importantly, she had changed his. In choosing to stay, to build something beautiful from the ashes of what might have been a catastrophic future, they had both discovered that some stories are worth living, even if they cannot be told exactly as the heart might wish. Their love would remain unspoken in its deepest form, but it would be lived out in every choice they made to protect and nurture the peace they had fought to create. And in the end, that, too, was a kind of destiny, one they had chosen together.